She said I was trouble. I told her she was addicted. The first time I noticed her, she was leaning over the railing of her balcony, sunlight catching the soft strands of her hair, golden at the edges. She looked almost ethereal against the backdrop of blooming jasmine and the quiet hum of early morning traffic. There was an effortless grace in the way she moved, a subtle confidence that seemed to command the space around her without a word. I, of course, tried to appear casual as I watered my small patch of garden, pretending I wasn't staring. But curiosity, or maybe something stronger, drew my eyes back to her. "Careful there, you're trouble," she called down suddenly, her voice smooth and light, carrying across the small courtyard. It wasn't a warning. It was teasing. I froze for a second, caught off guard, before a grin spread across my face. "And you're addicted to it," I replied without thinking, the words tasting bolder than I expected. There was a flicker of surprise in her eyes, quickly replaced by a small, amused smile. That single exchange, brief, casual, playful, set my pulse racing in ways I hadn't anticipated. It was strange how a few words could spark such a vivid curiosity. I noticed the curve of her shoulders as she adjusted her stance, the gentle sway of her hair as a breeze lifted it, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. Every detail seemed heightened, and the quiet morning around us, the scent of wet earth from the garden, the faint aroma of her perfume drifting upward, the distant hum of cars, became the backdrop to this small, extraordinary encounter. I lingered longer than necessary at the garden hose, not wanting to break the spell of that fleeting moment. Her presence was magnetic, though subtle, nothing forced or loud. It was in the gentle tilt of her head, the warmth that seemed to radiate from her posture, and the effortless composure she maintained even as our teasing words hung in the air. In that moment, I realized something. She had a way of turning a casual interaction into something charged, something quietly unforgettable. It wasn't just the teasing. It was the way she made me notice things, details, sensations, the flutter of curiosity and awareness that made me more alive. I could feel it in the small tension of my chest, in the quickened rhythm of my heartbeat. Something was stirring, subtle but undeniable, and I knew, even then, that this first encounter was only the beginning. And somehow, I didn't mind that at all. It was one of those mornings when the city felt quieter, almost paused, as if giving us room to notice the small, almost imperceptible details of life. I was heading to the corner cafe, my mind half occupied with work emails and half with the memory of our first teasing exchange. And then, there she was, standing near the entrance, browsing through the morning paper. She hadn't seen me yet, and for a brief moment, she looked utterly unguarded, a side of her that was far from the confident, teasing persona I had glimpsed from my balcony. Our eyes met as I stepped closer, and she offered a small, knowing smile, the kind that made me simultaneously nervous and inexplicably at ease. "You again," she said, a hint of amusement in her tone, as if she had been expecting me all along. There was a rhythm in the way we spoke, a subtle push and pull, teasing, yes, but underlaid with a genuine curiosity about each other. We ended up sharing a table when the cafe crowded, our chairs brushing lightly as we settled. I could feel the warmth radiating from her arm as she reached for her coffee, and my pulse caught when our fingers briefly touched while passing a sugar packet. The touch was fleeting, yet it lingered in my mind, a quiet electric current that neither of us openly acknowledged, but both felt. Conversation flowed easier this time. I noticed the little things, the way her eyes softened when she laughed, how her fingers absently traced the rim of her cup, the gentle inflection in her voice when she recounted a story. She was careful, too, choosing her words, revealing just enough about herself to keep me intrigued without giving everything away. And yet, there was vulnerability hidden in her pauses, a softness beneath the confident exterior that made me want to understand her better. I found myself leaning in slightly, not consciously, as if drawn to her by an invisible thread. I caught the faint scent of her perfume, a warm, comforting aroma that mingled with the rich smell of coffee and toasted bread. The cafe's ambient noise, the quiet clatter of cups, the low hum of conversation, seemed to fade, leaving only the space between us charged with unspoken awareness. When our encounter ended, there was a hesitation neither of us rushed to break. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, her eyes lingering on mine, and I felt a small, thrilling ache, the kind that comes from realizing that a simple, accidental closeness can feel extraordinary. That morning, the city had not changed, yet something between us had, subtly, profoundly. And I knew we were only at the beginning of discovering just how magnetic our connection could be. The days after our accidental cafe encounter carried a subtle weight I couldn't shake. Every time I saw her across the courtyard or on a stroll nearby, there was a quiet electricity in the air, playful, teasing, but tempered by an unspoken awareness of boundaries. She had this effortless way of testing limits without ever seeming aggressive. Her wit was sharp, yet warm, and every remark felt like a gentle challenge meant just for me. One afternoon, our paths collided near the little park at the end of the block. I was fumbling with a stack of books, the corners digging into my palms, when she appeared out of nowhere. "You really are trouble," she said lightly, leaning against the fence with an amused tilt to her head. I managed a crooked smile, brushing a loose strand of hair from my forehead. "And you seem addicted," I replied, my voice a little steadier than I felt. Her laugh was soft, melodic, carrying in the warm afternoon air. She stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the subtle warmth radiating from her, yet not intrusively. Our shoulders brushed when she leaned to glance at the titles in my hands, and the contact, though brief, sent an unexpected thrill through me. The sun caught the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, highlighting her quiet elegance, and I realized how much I was noticing, every movement, every inflection in her voice, the way she seemed to effortlessly command attention without demanding it. Conversation became our dance, a playful exchange layered with teasing and unspoken meaning. She would mention past adventures or experiences, a trip she'd taken years ago, a lesson learned the hard way, and I'd respond with youthful impulsiveness, joking about my own ambitions and mistakes. The contrast between our life experiences became part of the charm, her calm, measured wisdom against my restless curiosity. I found myself hanging on every word, imagining what it would be like to share even the smallest moments with her. The park around us faded into the background, the rustle of leaves, the distant chatter of children, the faint scent of blooming flowers all seemed to amplify the tension between us. Every glance lingered a heartbeat too long, every touch accidental yet charged, a brush of fingers as she handed me a book, the faint pressure of her hand against mine as we shifted to leave. By the time we parted ways that afternoon, the teasing had done its work. Boundaries were acknowledged yet subtly blurred, and the magnetic pull between us felt undeniable. I walked away with a heightened awareness of every detail, the warmth of the sun on my skin, the echo of her laughter, and the realization that our playful boundaries were only drawing us closer, inch by inch, touch by touch, word by word. It was one of those unexpected afternoons when the world seemed to conspire to bring us closer. The sky had turned a soft gray, rain threatening but not quite falling, and the city carried that hushed, anticipatory calm that makes small moments feel monumental. I had been walking home from an errand, hands full of parcels, when I saw her struggling to adjust an umbrella that had flipped in the light breeze. I rushed over instinctively, offering help, and her eyes met mine, a mixture of relief and something softer, more intimate, that made my chest tighten. "Thanks," she said, her voice quieter than usual, almost shy, as if she were letting down a carefully maintained guard. She handed me one corner of the umbrella, and for a moment, our hands touched, lingering just enough to make the electric pulse of proximity impossible to ignore. Her fingers were warm, lightly calloused from life, and the touch carried an unspoken reassurance, a quiet invitation to be present. As we walked together under the shared umbrella, conversation slowed. The teasing banter that had defined our earlier encounters gave way to something gentler. She spoke about a recent challenge at work, the kind she usually carried alone, and I listened, feeling honored by the trust implicit in her openness. I noticed the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way she exhaled slowly when she finally allowed herself a small laugh, and the way her gaze softened whenever it drifted toward me. I realized, in that hushed, rain-tinged moment, that vulnerability could be magnetic. It wasn't about drama or confessions shouted across rooms, it was about quiet honesty, small cracks in the armor that let warmth slip through. I shared a memory of my own, a minor failure, a fear I rarely voiced, and saw her expression shift from amusement to something more tender, a recognition that we were, somehow, carefully threading the same delicate space between trust and attraction. The world around us seemed to blur, the scent of damp earth mingling with her faint perfume, the distant rhythm of rain beginning to patter against the pavement, the subtle brush of our arms as we adjusted to avoid puddles. Each sensation, each small contact, felt amplified, like the universe had slowed just enough for us to notice the extraordinary in the ordinary. By the time we parted, there was no dramatic declaration, no overt move toward romance. Instead, there was a quiet resonance, a shared understanding that our connection had deepened. My heart was lighter, yet racing, my mind was clearer, yet full of possibilities. For the first time, the attraction between us felt more than playful teasing, it was a gentle, undeniable current of curiosity, trust, and budding desire, carried in the soft warmth of proximity, the subtle pressure of a hand, and the unspoken promise that we were beginning to see each other for who we truly were. The tension between us had grown in ways neither of us fully admitted, but it was undeniable. There was a rhythm to our interactions now, a subtle dance of closeness and restraint. Every accidental touch, every glance held a weight that neither words nor laughter could release. It was quiet, almost imperceptible to anyone watching, but to me, it was electric, a pulse that quickened whenever she was near. It happened one evening when we were returning from a small neighborhood event. The sun had dipped low, casting a warm, golden hue over the pavement, and a soft breeze carried the faint scent of flowers from nearby gardens. We walked side by side, shoulders brushing lightly, the proximity filling the spaces between words with an unspoken understanding. Our conversation was easy, playful even, but beneath it lay a tension that made my chest tighten and my thoughts scatter. At one point, she reached for a stray leaf caught on my jacket sleeve. Our fingers met as she brushed it away, lingering just a moment too long. I could feel the warmth of her hand, the softness of her touch against my skin, and my mind went blank with the quiet intensity of it. It wasn't just a brush of fingers, it was an affirmation, a subtle acknowledgement that the magnetic pull we felt toward each other was mutual. The city around us seemed to fade, leaving only the narrow corridor of the sidewalk, the faint rustle of leaves, and the quiet cadence of our steps. Her hair swayed gently in the evening breeze, and I caught myself memorizing the way the light caught the strands, the curve of her jaw, the tilt of her head as she listened to me speak. Every detail became amplified, every glance lingering a heartbeat too long. We paused at a street corner, and for a moment, we simply stood close, neither speaking, neither moving away. I felt her breath brush against my cheek, her presence almost tangible, as if I could reach out and cup her face without hesitation. Yet neither of us did, the restraint itself became a shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement of desire tempered by respect and the slow-burning nature of our connection. As we parted that evening, the unspoken longing remained, humming between us like a quiet melody neither wanted to interrupt. Every glance backward, every slight hesitation before turning away, carried the weight of possibility. We had crossed a line without words, a boundary defined by touch, proximity, and the silent pull of attraction. The tension was alive, charged, and entirely ours, leaving me both breathless and craving more, knowing that the journey toward emotional and romantic closeness was only beginning. The evening had settled into a soft, golden twilight, the kind that blurs the edges of the world and seems to hold its breath. We found ourselves walking along the quiet path near the riverbank, the faint lapping of water against the stones providing a gentle rhythm to our steps. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a shared awareness that this moment carried weight, though neither of us had yet spoken the words that hovered just beneath the surface. I noticed how the fading light caught her hair, highlighting the subtle streaks of silver at the edges, a testament to years lived fully, gracefully. She walked beside me with an easy composure, but I could see the small signs of vulnerability too, a slight pause before speaking, a softness in her gaze, the way her hands occasionally fidgeted with the strap of her bag. The sight of it stirred a protective, tender feeling in me, one I hadn't fully recognized until now. Finally, we stopped at a small wooden bench overlooking the water. She sat first, a graceful motion, and I followed, careful not to crowd her space but close enough that our knees nearly touched. For a while, we were silent, letting the world shrink to the quiet intimacy of shared presence. The faint scent of her perfume mingled with the cool evening air, and I felt the warmth of her shoulder as it occasionally brushed mine. "I've been thinking," she began softly, her voice almost swallowed by the gentle rustle of leaves. "About us. About how strange and unexpected this has all been." She turned slightly to look at me, and in that glance was an honesty I had been craving, the kind that makes you want to drop every wall you've built. "I've felt it too," I admitted, my voice quieter than usual, careful, deliberate. "This pull. It's more than I expected. More than I knew I wanted." There was a pause, a shared exhale, as if the weight of our unspoken longing had finally found release. Her hand moved lightly, brushing against mine, a touch that carried warmth, reassurance, and a delicate promise. Our eyes met, and for the first time, there was no teasing, no playful challenge, just clarity. The attraction that had simmered beneath laughter, glances, and accidental touches had finally found acknowledgement. The world around us, the soft rustling of leaves, the distant hum of the city, the gentle ripple of water, seemed to hold its breath with us. The tension that had defined our interactions for weeks melted into something steady and profoundly human, connection, understanding, and the quiet thrill of mutual desire acknowledged. That night, for the first time, the future didn't feel uncertain. It felt possible. And the knowledge that we could finally speak our hearts made every shared glance, every lingering touch, feel richer, warmer, and infinitely more intimate. The days that followed felt lighter, as if acknowledging our feelings had lifted a quiet weight we hadn't realized we were carrying. There was no rush, no dramatic confessions beyond what had already been said, only the calm, steady rhythm of being near each other, discovering that closeness could be quiet, easy, and profoundly satisfying. One late afternoon, we found ourselves sitting side by side on the small bench in the courtyard, the same one that had first sparked a sense of connection months ago. She leaned slightly toward me, her shoulder brushing against mine, and I felt a warmth that went beyond physical proximity. It was comfort, safety, and trust bundled into a simple touch. I caught the faint scent of her perfume, a soft, lingering aroma that felt like home, grounding me in the present moment. We spoke in gentle, unhurried tones, sharing stories from our days, laughing quietly at private jokes, and sometimes letting silence speak for itself. The world around us, children playing in the distance, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the golden afternoon light bathing the courtyard, seemed to fade, leaving only the quiet intimacy of shared presence. There was no need for grand gestures, a lingering glance, the subtle brush of fingers, or the way she shifted slightly to rest her hand near mine carried more meaning than words ever could. I watched her smile as she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and I realized that this unspoken understanding, this gentle interweaving of lives, was far more profound than any fleeting passion. Our connection was built on small, deliberate moments, leaning together under umbrellas, sharing coffee, brushing hands as we reached for the same book. Each of these tiny gestures now felt like threads binding us closer, creating a tapestry of trust, affection, and quiet longing fulfilled. She laughed softly at a story I recounted, and I reached out instinctively to touch her arm, a light, natural gesture. Her hand met mine for a brief, comfortable moment, and the electricity that had once made my heart race now felt like a steady, warm current. It was familiar, intimate, and infinitely satisfying. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the courtyard, I realized that the slow burn of our connection had blossomed into something real, sustainable, and profoundly human. We didn't need dramatic declarations or public spectacles. Our closeness, built on teasing, shared vulnerability, and quiet touches, was enough. Sitting there together, shoulder to shoulder, hand lightly brushing against hand, I felt a deep contentment. We were not just drawn to each other by desire, we were connected by understanding, respect, and the simple joy of being present with one another. For the first time, the world felt right, and I knew that this slow, steady journey, from playful teasing to quiet intimacy, had led us to a place of genuine, lasting togetherness. If you enjoyed this slow burn love story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss the next heartfelt tale. Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear which moment stole your heart the most.